Bienvenidos a Mesa Redonda. Con ustedes, Claudia Palacio.
Well, welcome everyone to Roundtable. Today is not Mesa Redonda because our invitees speak only English. So today we are sitting around a round table. And please, the English native speakers could correct my English if you please. That will help me a lot to improve. But I want to welcome, first of all, Gabriela Najar, who is always here with me. Gaby, ¿cómo estás?
Hola, Claudia. Hello, Claudia. How are you? This is our first roundtable in English, which is very exciting. So thank you.
It is very exciting, and it is more exciting because we have two great colleagues with us here tonight. And I need you to help me with your names because this is one of the things that we learn in Canada when we move here, that names come from different languages and therefore the pronunciation could vary. So for me, it's Miss Noor, Noor Jinah, but if I am pronouncing it wrong, Noor, please correct me.
Perfect.
Fantastic. Well, let me tell you something. Noor has been working in immigration for a while, and she has been dealing with a lot of cases for nomination, especially in the Atlantic provinces. And since this is something that gets the attention of so many people, that's why we invited her here tonight. And the other consultant that is here with us tonight is Leanne Deboski. Did I pronounce it well?
Perfect. You're on a roll.
Yeah, I'm on a roll. This language is something that I will never master, but if Sofia Vergara makes $100 million with mispronouncing half of the words, well, I can make it in public with English. So Leanne is the owner of Greystone Immigration. Noor is always immigration, and let's say that somehow the four of us had gotten together for several cases, co-counseling, so we know each other very well, and we have been cooperating for a while now. So thank you very much for being with Gaby and with me tonight, girls.
Thank you for having us.
A pleasure. Honor to be here.
It is a pleasure.
Yeah.
And this shows that no matter what language we speak, we work together as an immigration consultants. We support each other with different cases. Sometimes Miss Noor and Claudia had nice conversations that gets you a different idea on how to proceed with a case. And we work in the same industry, but at the same time we support each other.
Yeah.
Well, we are here tonight to discuss what happened when I get my PR supported by an employer. There's a lot of information going around in social media about, well, you know what? Simply find an employer who wants to support you. And once you get that job offer, apply for nomination or apply for PR with arranged employment because you have a job offer. And once the papers are sent, submitted, great. You can move and do whatever you want because you already applied. And I'm going to refer here to something that I know is Gaby doesn't like numbers. I love them. But there is a section in the immigration law that says that conditions have to be met at the moment of application and at the moment of approval. So starting from there, tell us what happened, what has been your experience, Noor and Leanne, when a client applies, or let's start from the beginning. What's the reaction of an employer when someone knocks on their door and says, listen, I want to remain in Canada, I need your help, would you help me with a job offer?
I think employers are very quick to say, yes, labor shortages exist. This is the reality of today's world. And so every employer is looking for good support, good staff. And so the first thing is, this person sounds amazing. Can I get your resume? Tell me about your qualifications. Let's meet. And the first initial meeting is usually online, as most candidates are overseas. And so that's the beginning of the journey. And I'm sure, as most of you are aware, everything being online now, social media, we sometimes are very quick to judge people based on their appearance, based on their experience, what a piece of paper says. But the truth is, we lose out on meeting in person, understanding each other. And so it's a risk that I think the employers take to say yes. It's also a risk for the person that's going to take employment because they're moving to a new place. An employer has kind of given them lots of hope, lots of promises. And so both sides, I think it's very scary yet very hopeful, and it's a fine balance of finding how you can maintain that relationship and make sure that you meet conditions from both the employer's perspective as we're here to talk about the applicants or candidates, making sure that they meet the requirements, that they fulfill the conditions.
And what happened? Because it sounds very, very easy, Noor. When we see in social media that Canada is looking for 1 million employees, and Leanne has heard from people from all around the world, and it is great that we are sitting here because we all handle different markets. But does it truly the employer support someone from overseas? Is that simple? Is that easy? In my experience, once the employers start looking at the conditions and the paperwork and the length of time and the cost, they say, oh my God, really? Do I need to go through all of this? Do I have to wait for 7 months or for 8 months for someone to come to Canada to actually take a flight to help me with something that I need today? What has been your experience?
I think for me, when I speak to employers, I'm able to kind of say to them, look, if we were to weigh inside Canada using an employment agency or getting someone to come on your payroll and then they leave in 3 months, okay? Or they constantly are having turnovers where they have to constantly train. When you look at all of those cons, you know, sometimes you think, should I be employing people that are inside Canada? If I use an employment agency, I pay an extra $2 to $3 per hour per candidate or per staff member for maybe 8 hours a day. So financially, if you're able to map it out, truly foreign nationals that come in and when employers support, it can actually be amazing. The issue arises when they don't understand that the program can be beneficial for them. And I think that's the importance of where we come into place, or any of our colleagues would come into place to explain. I think an employer has to do their research to understand what they're going to be providing to the applicant, what their commitments will be. But when we talk about just cost, if you're going to get someone that's going to join you for 2 years and be a part of your team, I think can be an absolutely amazing journey. There are a lot of benefits for having foreign nationals join your team. They come with a skill set from abroad, a different work ethic. They have knowledge about culture. They have different people skills. Their education is different. And so I think that being in Canada and having Canada be so multicultural, there are many, many benefits. And as long as we can explain that, we can mitigate the, oh my God, it's so expensive. So many government fees. I have so many responsibilities. One thing that a lot of people don't know is that any employer, whether they're hiring from within Canada, someone that's a permanent resident or a Canadian citizen, or whether they're hiring a foreign national, the labor laws and the standards are the same. The
Exactly.
person that works for you is an employee in the same regard. It does not matter where you're from as long as you have legal status to work.
And agree with in that point, and agree with you, Noor. But at the same time, the employers are afraid of a situation that you mentioned before. Who am I hiring? What about this person when he comes to Canada? He doesn't have the qualifications he told me he had. He doesn't have the experience that he told me he had. Because we many people kind of lie in the resumes. And yeah, in paper is one thing, and when they're on the field, it's completely different. But I'm going to tell you, I used to work for a company who used to have a lot of foreign workers. There was a company, there were restaurants, and there was a point that they decided not to apply or to support. That is the main reason of the team that we're talking about today, to support the permanent residencies. And the reason was because as soon as they become permanent residents, they leave me. So I supported them. I did everything for them. I helped them to bring their family to Canada. And as soon as they become permanent residents, they leave. So, and I think that's one of the most important things that people need to understand, that yes, the employer is supporting you to come with a work permit. Yes, you are free to go and work for anyone else. But I think that the loyalty part and the ethics part is getting lost from the employee when they become permanent residents. But what happens when, let's say, we have an application for permanent residency, then the employer is giving them an arranged employment. It's a job offer that they're supposed to work for them for a year, but this application is under the provincial nominee program that we know that is going to take about 72 months to be decided. So what happens when they get the open work permit? Many people quit and they leave their employers, even though they have that commitment with the province and with the employer to work. And that's when the problems come. And that's why many employers are reluctant to hire people from overseas.
Leanne, what has been your experience? I want to hear your part of this story.
Well, I was just thinking with regards to what Gabby's saying, I think a lot of the issue comes with a miscommunication or a lack of communication between employer and employee, or candidate and employer. And I think, there's a tendency to get caught up in the excitement of the process, to be excited about the job offer. Many foreign nationals are thinking, okay, great, I'll take any job offer, any employer that's willing to, it doesn't matter what province. And I think, there's an onus on candidates to be very mindful. Canada is a huge country. Provinces are very different. Economics are very different. Cultures are very different. And I think, in my experience, a lot of people, they're just so anxious for an opportunity to come. They have not done the proper research into where they're going, what the environment is like, both, culturally. Is it going to be, Edmonton is entirely different than where you guys are in Toronto. And many of these job offers are in remote areas. Those are all things that really need to be communicated by the employer, need to be understood and researched by the employee, because like Gabby said, yes, technically the law is very, ambiguous about, can you leave provinces once you've been nominated by one? Can you just leave for another? Technically, yes. However, you're putting your PR in jeopardy, right? And I don't think a lot of people understand that. If I'm nominated in Alberta and during the time that I have that open work permit, I decide I really want to be in Ontario, there's no police officer that's going to stop you from leaving. However, when it comes time for your PR to be finalized, if you have not met those conditions, if you have not stayed with where you were offered your employment, you're at risk of losing that, right? You're at risk of your PR being not approved. If you've already received PR, you're at risk of it being revoked when you apply for citizenship. There's serious consequences to these things. So I do think in all aspects, there's just a lack of understanding of what all is involved. And perhaps that's on both sides, right? The employer has a responsibility to, like you said, really communicate with the candidate, both what their eligibility is for the job and also, what to expect when they come, so that everybody is well informed long before you reach those potential issues.
And there could be circumstances like Noor mentioned, that sometimes not sometimes, all the time, the labor laws apply for a foreign worker the same as a person who lives in Canada, permanent resident or a citizen. So that means that they can be fired or they can quit. But let's say that a company goes in bankruptcy and they have to close. What happens with that foreign worker who had a job offer? So there are options to solve that issue. But
Gaby, I have always said that one thing is when goals go wrong for situations out of your control. But
exactly.
it's completely different when you make the decision of leaving the company that supported you.
Completely. And I was going into that point. It's completely different. One, you decided to quit and now with the company had to close down. It's completely situation. It's something that is fixable as long as you remain in the province or as long as you are in the conditions that you have your PR approved with.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
One of the things that I am. Oh, sorry, Gaby.
No.
Go ahead.
This is a very complex issue that we always hear about the Charter of Right Freedoms that you can live, you have the freedom to move, like the mobility rights, you have the freedom to move. But yeah, you do. But like Leanne said, nobody's going to stop you. But the consequences are going to come in the moment that you have to renew your PR card or apply for citizenship.
Yeah.
The interesting thing that I have seen through all of this is, and when I always tell the clients, is there are two different things here at risk. The first is the chapter, as you said, Gaby, allows us all Canadians and permanent residents to move around the country wherever, whenever, and wherever we want. But happens that when we are applying for nomination, first of all, the conditions are not as simple as it seems. In social media, we are always saying, get a job offer, get the support of your employer, sign this piece of paper, submit it, and that's it. Most of us don't read the fine print. And when we check the last, I remember, I don't know if it is still the same in Ontario, but the last time I read the fine print, now because I know it by heart, I don't read it anymore, which is a mistake. But in the bottom of the page, there was a very fine printing that said that the company is signing an agreement to keep the person employed for at least 1 year after PR, right? And the company signed and the employee signed because that application has to be signed by both. So what I have seen is that they are not coming against the person, the PR now, the permanent resident of Canada now, because they moved to another province, not because they infringed their rights or the chapter. No, it's because misrepresentation. And why misrepresentation? Because you sign a compromise with the company to stay there, to remain there. It is not that you don't have the right to move. Is the fact that you lie to immigration at the moment that you apply. And that's one problem for me, the thing that Canada never forgets. You can ask for rehabilitation for murder or for having, I don't know, broken into a bank. But for lying is kind of the worst sin in Canada. You are getting probation for 8 years if you come through the border with something that you are not allowed to bring, an antibiotic, or you didn't declare whatever you brought, and you are treated like the worst criminal. So lying to Canada in anything, taxes, immigration, whatever, is a huge issue, and that is what is causing problems.
Yeah, it's a ban for 5 years, but in reality, it's a ban forever.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think people think, okay, 5 years, I'll try again. But it's once that's on your record, you're going to have a really hard time convincing them that you're not going to lie again, right?
Exactly. It's because that is comes like credibility on the applicant, and to gain that back, that confidence from Canada is going to be almost impossible to do. And it's funny, Claudia, that or Noor and Leanne, many years ago, people could have done what we're saying not to do right now, and they had no consequences. But because of that, and because a lot of people took advantage of these programs, is why they're very strict about how to proceed with this. As we were mentioned before we started, I received today a request for a letter of employment pay stubs, notice of assessment, all the proof that the person is still working for the employer that did that job offer for an application that submitted 2 years ago. So, and it's funny because about 6 or 7 months ago, they called me and I said, "Oh, I don't want to continue working for this employer." And I said, "You should continue working for this employer." And he's like, "A lot of people told me I can change." And I said, "Well, do you want to follow my advice or what the old people is telling you?" And today I proved to him that they were going to request it.
Anyone can choose the risk that they want to take, but that is one of the things. And especially now, my concern is that during COVID, a lot of programs somehow relax the rules because we were in a very difficult situation, right? So most of the provinces said, well, if you got the support for nomination with the company A and the company has to close or the salary cannot continue being the same, you cannot keep with the same hours, whatever the condition that change, we can somehow allow you to continue change employers or fix it somehow. Just tell us what happened and we will help you through this. So we got accustomed because the pandemic was too long that we all tended to believe that this is the new rule. But it is not a rule, it was an exception. So what's happening is that also during the pandemic, social media exploded, right? So before pandemic, none of us were in social media in any channels talking about immigration or doing lives or recording videos. It was a one-on-one consultation, probably very few through Zoom or any platform. But this was not common. But in the pandemic, this exploded. And when it exploded, it started, well, people started telling their own stories without knowing why they were lucky, right? So they believe that that is the norm, when it's actually the exception. So my concern is that in a couple of years, because as Gaby said, the applications for PR are taking 27 months, we will start seeing letters from immigration saying, listen, you need us to prove that you are still complying, or here is your fairness letter. You have to leave the country, or we are going to revoke your PR because you didn't comply with the requirements. And it's funny because it is the same situation, and I am bringing here a completely different topic, but cessation of refugee status because people return to their home country or the country where they apply for refuge after becoming permanent residents is something that never happened until 2011, 2012. All of a sudden, there was a huge amount of cases reopened and everything went quiet again. And about a month ago, 2 or 3 cases from federal court, and people started being deported again because they applied for refuge, they got their PR, they went back home, and all of a sudden immigration reopens the case, and you know what? Bye. So the fact that nothing happened to my friend doesn't mean that nothing is going to happen to me. It all depends on who will open my PR extension application or my citizenship application, and that is a huge risk. I will never risk living in Canada with the guillotine on my neck, just waiting for the officer, crossing my fingers that the one who opened my case is someone that is not married that day and he's not going to look to the details.
And I think, Claudia, you're right when you say COVID has really kind of, I don't want to say retrained us, but it's actually put everybody's guard down to assume that this is the norm. But the truth is, immigration isn't easy. And the reality is, there are a lot of rules and there are a lot of eligibility requirements. And so it is important that applicants don't take that for granted. I believe that immigration in some way is, yes, you're eligible, but it's also a privilege to be eligible to come to Canada, to be able to start a new life here, because many people, from international countries, they are coming here to make life better, to leave the conditions of their current countries, to be able to have equal opportunity, to be able to live safely, whatever the reason being is, maybe to reunite with their family members. And I think applicants have to understand, and specifically in the regards of when they're getting employer support, that they are truly very lucky. There are so many people that pray for this opportunity, that wish for this opportunity, who may never get it. And so, if those that are coming misuse the system, eventually it will close the doors for everybody, or it will just become so difficult that, you know, it's going to basically cause turmoil within the immigration realm when we talk about employer support. And I think that, yes, when you asked me earlier about, is it something that's easy? How are employers taking it? I think it is such a great solution and a win-win for both the employer and the employee, but there's an onus on both of them to be responsible, to understand their obligations, to not misuse the system, and to also understand that whether it's a paper that they sign or a word, a verbal agreement, right? When you have an interview and you say, I want to do this job, it is important that you keep your word, because I think that just from the perspective, Gabby mentioned that recently people are forgetting these basic, humanities of, hey, I gave you my word. I'm going to keep it. Keeping trust, keeping faith. And I think that's key.
I remember listening to a situation that broke my heart because in for the Latin American community, it's not easy to find jobs in Canada, right? We have the limitation of the language, so finding an employer that could deal with our lack of communication and the long processing times and everything is complicated. So listening to a company who offered the support to an employee, and the employees took advantage of the employer is kind of sad. But the situation was so traumatic that, mm, well, the employer supported the employees. She filed an application for an LMIA. The LMIA went through. The employer brought the person from overseas and they started working. They waited until they got the nomination, not the PR. And once they were nominated, they went and denounced the employer falsely, from my point of view, but it's my opinion, just to get rid of the condition of staying with the employer for so long. So the other employees that this person had or this company had that were waiting for their support, well, I think they are gonna get in trouble. Then maybe the employer is not gonna follow through anymore with support because it's getting too complicated. Have you heard something similar? What's the reaction with the employers? What are the consequences? Have you heard something about audits from the ESDC or from the provincial nominee programs? Something that you can share that people can understand how deep this, the provincial nomination or the government agencies can go.
Yeah, myself, I think Leanne, Claudia, I think we've all kind of had this situation arise where, employees take advantage. But when it gets to a point that an employee um, takes advantage to such a level where the employer is affected, there's so many levels when we talk about ESDC getting involved and now checking the conditions of the LMI originally, making sure was the employer compliant, requiring the employer to now go back, let's say 1 year, and start noting every single thing that has happened since day one. Did they keep a record of everything? So paperwork, which now takes them away from their normal work that they would be doing. Okay. Number crunching, then realizing that if ESDC gets involved, guess what? Now Service Canada and the CRA are involved, right? It's a big chain because now even employees that are working there who aren't temporary foreign workers, the government does inspect and audit to make sure that everyone is being treated fairly. I think that it is heartbreaking. Word that you used, it is heartbreaking to see that employer has to go through so much paperwork to prove that they were compliant, that they met the conditions as an employer. And sometimes not intentionally. We had an experience when an employer was using automated system for pay, and minimum wages had changed, therefore that means overtime or pay rates change. Well, there was a malfunction in technology. Nobody would have ever known unless this audit happened. But guess what? The employer is now looked upon as not meeting the conditions due to a technical issue. And no matter how much they might say, no, please listen to me, guess what? The employee is always right. And it's kind of a challenge because it's disheartening for that employer. They may no longer ever be able to support a foreign national. Any nominations that have been put through a provincial program might have to be removed. So all the other staff, like you mentioned, that are working there, guess what? Due to no fault of their own, they now are losing their opportunity to get immigration in Canada because the employer might be found to be non-compliant. And let me tell you, it is really, really time consuming, very painful, to constantly be under the radar of the government, Canadian government. Like you said, the Canadian government doesn't forget. Even if you weren't wrong, it's something that stays on your record. And so eyes always on you. And so, yes, we have experienced that. Uh, Luckily, we got through successfully. The employer did meet all the compliance requirements, but it was a lot of digging, fighting, and also a lot of heartbreak to say these people that, the employer has supported and brought here to build a new life, to build relationships with those employees, to bring them over, whether it be their tickets, whether it be helping them find balance in their new home, whether it be to provide them maybe a comfort of, we understand that your culture isn't here. So let us help you to bring your culture to our world. So many small instances like that. All of a sudden, the employer feels like their trust was broken. They feel like, why did I do that? Why was I helpful? I shouldn't have been helpful. And so there's this bittersweet kind of hate now for immigration. But also, the next time somebody comes that could be qualified, the employer is going to think 1,000 times through to say, do I really want to do this? Because it actually ended up biting me in the bum. So, things to think about.
And it happens more often than you think. It happens more often, and sometimes it's like people are talking to friends, and friends are saying, "Oh, you shouldn't be working for them because you are working every Saturday and Sunday. You're eligible to work any time of the day." And if people start complaining about small things, then they can create this problem. And like you said, is basically the employer is going to think, why am I going to do it again? Especially when they have those investigations that you were talking about, uh, that it was a complaint made for a simple thing that they didn't allow me to go to the washroom when I wanted to, or they didn't allow me to take a day off because it was my daughter's birthday. And even though a situation like that can create that investigation and put the employer at risk. And it's when they think, why I'm going to go through all this expensive process that is causing me a lot of work, headaches, and money for people who are not being grateful for what I did. I totally agree with you. And like I said before, the company that I worked for, we had about 540, 535 foreign workers working for this restaurant. It was basically the 90% of the workforce was foreign workers, because they have restaurants all around Alberta and BC. But eventually the employer said, no more. I'm not going to do it anymore, because as soon as I support them with the permanent residency, they leave. And they not only leave them, so they gave work to their daughter, to their wife, to everybody, because that's what many employers do. They support the whole family to get jobs. The brother, the sister, the cousin, and you have all the same family working for you, and suddenly they all leave because they became permanent residents at the same time. Yeah, it is an amazing situation. Sometimes not everybody is the same. You have amazing employees who stay with you until the end of days, and they are extremely grateful, and they know what the employer did for them, and they become family. One of my clients became a partner with the person who hired him, and they own the business together now. So it is a different kind of experiences, but reality is that our people, like people, foreign workers, not our people, foreign workers work harder than locals. And I'm saying locals, permanent residents or citizens, no matter what citizenship they are. They foreign workers, those who are in a work permit, work way harder than the people who live in Canada.
100%. And Leanne said something, that I truly believe that everyone should do is do your research. You mentioned, Gabby, that people talk to their friends and then the friend says something else. Well, if you're going to Ontario, the wage is absolutely going to be different, but the cost of living is also different. The lifestyle is different. Okay. If you go to Alberta, it's going to be different. If we go to, Prince Edward Island, PEI, it's going to be different. And what I think is key, like Leanne said, is if you are coming to Canada and you've applied for a job, do your research. What is the culture like there? What is the lifestyle like? What is the cost of living? What is the wage that I'm getting compared to that area? Don't start comparing yourself to Ontario or maybe, BC, British Columbia, because the reality is, yes, the wage might be higher, but the truth is, you're also going to pay a lot more to live there. And so, as a newcomer, whether you're, a temporary foreign worker or whether you're coming as a permanent resident, reality is that you want to be able to sustain in Canada. You want to be smart so that you can be successful, that you and your family can come here and make Canada home, not come here and say, oh, I just hate it and I want to go back to my country, right? Which we hear all the time. People are like, well, back home, I had this. And back, it's true, right? Cultural differences. So the key thing that I think is important that everyone needs to take home is research. Be responsible, do your research, and ask questions. Don't just get excited in, I've got an employer that's supporting me. And employers also don't get excited that you've got an employee. Ask questions. Processing times are really long right now. You have time to get to know each other. Do that so that when you do come, you've built a good reputation so that hopefully you won't want to, kill each other or leave, or, we don't create such situations because, I come back to it and I say that truly, 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 if you use it the right way, it is a fabulous solution for both labor shortage, for permanent residency, for skilled workers coming into Canada, and for people that deserve to have a new beginning. Canada is a great place to be.
For me, one of the things that we are missing in all of these scenarios is the part that as foreign workers looking for jobs, part of planning, a part of asking questions, we should consider the length of time of these applications and for how long do I need to stay in a job, and to actually think honestly and answer the question to myself if I will be able to remain in that position with that company in that place for so long. Mm, in average, it's taking, let's say, that the person is here under an open work permit as an international student with a post-graduation work permit or a dependent spouse of a student. In most of the provinces, they have to work between 6 and 9 months with the company to be eligible to apply for nomination. So there we have 6 months. Let's say it's only 6 months. And then we have to apply for nomination. Average time, you correct me, in my experience, it could be somewhere between 4 and 6 months.
Correct?
Right?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, so we are close to a year now. And then let's apply for PR. Happens that very few nominations go through the express entry. Most of them go through the other portal. Spectacular, 27 months.
Yep.
So now we are at the 38 months mark, right?
Yeah.
And then we have to remain with the company for at least 1 year to have the PR safe, to comply with the requirements, with our promise, to support the company through all of this process and whatever. So it's 4 years. And people talk so easily, saying, well, you know what? In Manitoba, you can apply for nomination in any job. So even if you have a job in cleaning, you stay for 6 months and then you apply for PR. No, hold on. Let's back up. Because at 6 months, with 6 months, you don't apply for PR, you apply for nomination. And yes, it is true, you can apply with any position. Manitoba doesn't mind, you need to have certain level of English because it's an unskilled position, but it doesn't matter, you will get there. Fantastic. The question is, for me, in my case, will my knees, my actually knees and my hips support me for 4 years cleaning at night? And will I stay in that position, or most likely I will quit? Because if I quit, not only my permanent residency could be at risk. It's also that, well, I am breaking the promise I made to the employer, saying, listen, help me here and I will help you, because it is a win-win situation. Maybe I should wait for 6 more months until I find a position that, I don't know, administrative assistant, that I can sit behind the desk and be more comfortable, because at my age, well, I cannot do this kind of physical jobs anymore. I have someone here to write in, and I have to answer this question. I'm sorry. But Lotari is saying, well, Leanne Deboski, do you work as an immigration consultant?
Yes, I do.
She's a very quiet one, but she has a lot of experience, Lotario. She has been doing immigration for a very long time. What happens is that she's quiet, and when you sit Gaby, Noor, and me in the same room, well, you get in trouble to even get one word in the middle.
Leanne is very, very, very intelligent. She is extremely organized, careful. She looks at every case with compassion, and she is quiet, but her mind up here is probably many, many years ahead of all of us. So
Yeah, it's working. What I'm gonna say next time I'm gonna say, ladies, stay quiet, it's my time.
the brains behind the heart, the brains behind the heart.
Exactly.
That's true. So,
Yeah,
Leanne,
no,
your turn. We're gonna keep quiet.
Oh,
and
geez.
what you said, Noor, is very important. There is a reason that we are the four here together, because we are all share the same things that Leanne does. We treat every case with compassion. We treat every case with our heart. We give everything for every client that is with us. We create their stories and we live their stories. And at the end, when you have a client that is already with you since they come as a workers, as a students, and you're applying for the permanent residency, and it's going to be 4 years to get it. So there is 6-7 years behind this case, and that means that those clients become your friends, and many times that happens. More than less.
Yeah, I think the compassion part is important, because I think all of us, I know Noor and I in particular, have deal with a lot of foreign nationals who come with a job offer and who are in these provincial nominee programs, and it is difficult to watch the frustration on both sides, with the employers and with the employees. And there's many cases, like you said, Claudia, how long can I actually do this? Because the other thing to consider is many people come, some people, many, and they don't have their families with them. For whatever reason, maybe the mom or the dad or the spouse comes and they can't bring everybody with them right away for whatever reason. The length of time that you're going to be away from family, away from friends, young people who come to study and do PGWP, and it's a long time. It's a long haul. None of this is a quick fix. None of this is, a band-aid solution to anything or a magic ticket. One of my former colleagues used to say, if I had fairy dust for everybody that asked for, you know, their PR to be shortened or their, you know, whatever, it's not like that. You have to be prepared. You have to be locked in. You have to do your research. Yeah, because it is difficult on both sides. You want to maintain the integrity of this program, right? And for every person, like we've talked about before, who says, well, my friend, you know, was able to do this or that, or I saw on YouTube that I could do this or that, like, it is that you bear the responsibility to verify these things. You bear the responsibility to check out your consultant, your lawyer, whoever's helping you. It really is worth taking
and to check your employer.
Sorry?
And to check your employer, because there's a lot of fraud.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, it bears repeating, checking your employer, checking how you got this job. Is your job, you know, a verified job? All of these things they're critical. Nothing, I think one of my biggest frustrations is clients who come in with a predetermined idea of how this is going to go, how quickly it's going to go based on Jim back home or Sally over here. And yeah, it's hard to both employers too, you know, who think that this is going to be a quick, easy fix. Great, you can find me a foreign worker and we'll be able to get them here quickly. I think expectations, Noor hears me say it all the time, but you know, you never want to be the person that overpromises and underdelivers. You want to be clear at the outset. This is going to take this much time. In theory, it could be longer, it could be shorter.
In theory, you just said it. Yesterday we were checking the processing times for visas in Colombia. 446 days, exactly. And the day before it was 146. So exactly. with immigration, you never know what to expect. And Leanne, what you said is fantastic. But Claudia said we are not supposed to read anything, but I need to read this. There is one former client and now friend of Claudia. Her name is Andrea, and she, after what I said, she just wrote, yes, like Claudia and I, we love each other. She was my consultant, but now she's my advisor and my friend in Canada. I love you, my Clau. It's fabulous to have this process done by persons who are serious, honest, and with human qualities. So this is amazing, Andrea. I'm sending you a hugs too, because what you just said is what makes our day. And Ms. Noor and Leanne can tell you is, yes, we have a lot of friends, and I have fantastic friends through this process. Claudia is crying, and but it is what it is. And I know that we are going through this process with people, and we're bringing dreams. And like you said, is we have to be certain and do not overpromise something that we are not going to be able to fulfill, because we are doing our job the best as we can, but we depend on the decision of a different person. Mm-hmm. And that person can completely change your outcome. Because you can be certain that you're doing the best, that the client qualifies under the program, especially when you're dealing with a humanitarian and compassionate grounds considerations, that the client, you said, oh, you have everything. So he definitely complies with all the requirements, but then the officer decides no. Right. And you do everything in your hands, but at the end, it's like a discretionary decision from the officer in these cases. Exactly.
But so, just because, or to make a point, Gaby, of what you were saying before, this is our passion. And well, the four of us are sitting here today because we know each other. We have worked together through several cases and heartbreaking cases. And the fact that we are here today telling you how complicated it is to find a job offer, to actually take the risk of moving to Canada, and also the employer to hire someone who knows that is going to take forever to arrive here and everything. And telling you the worst part, the black part of all of this story is because more heartbreaking than seeing people that says, well, I have filed or I have submitted 200 or 400 resumes and never has called me, is to sit in a consultation with someone who is already here, with a work permit or with a PRing process, and listening to them say, I don't think I can stand this anymore, or this is the letter I received from immigration. Now, what do I do? That is actually a heartbreaking moment in our lives. And we have seen it from the employer part and from the employees part. And it was when Gaby, probably 2 months ago, that we were in one of our lives, and someone in the chat wrote, I applied for nomination and everything went well, but last week I received a letter from immigration asking me to prove that I was still working with the company. I think it was about 2 months ago, Gaby.
Yeah.
And yes, it is happening, and it is happening more often than before. So we all should be prepared. And as Noor was saying, it's kind of moving to Canada because we love the way that this country lives should be an inspiration for us to live the Canadian way, not to bring from our countries our vices, because it is terrible to say it, but I have seen it in several consultations when I am with the father of two young adults, 19, 20 years old, and we're discussing how to apply for their permanent residency. So we are going through the study program and for how long, but they don't have work experience. So let's plan it for next year. Meanwhile, while you register in school and the semester starts, you know what, start working. And all of a sudden, parents come and say in front of the kids, oh, I can find a friend who writes the letter saying that they've been working. So if we want to move to Canada, because Canada is a great home, we should respect the processes, respect our word, respect our employers, because it's just a win-win situation. Don't bring to Canada, we shouldn't bring to Canada what we don't like from our countries.
And I think,
And
Claudia,
Andrea, if you continue writing those messages in this chat, you're gonna make me cry. I'm a crier.
Stop, Andrea. Stop.
I was going to say, Claudia, to touch upon what you said, one thing that I think is really, really important also is if you are working with, an authorized representative, whether it be, a regulated Canadian immigration consultant, whether it be a lawyer, whoever you choose to work with, when you trust somebody and you go to them and you say, hey, I'm thinking about quitting my job, and they come back to you and they tell you, please listen, this is why you should not, unless it is a genuine situation where there is abuse, and those things do happen. If someone is guiding you as to what you need to do to make sure you meet the eligibility, to make sure that you are compliant with the requirements, please trust and listen to them. You've gone to them for advice. You've come to us for this advice to say, what should we do? And we take our work home with us. This is not a 9 to 5 job. When we go home, we're worried at 4 a.m. every morning at 4 a.m. Guess what? IRCC sends these emails. So I'm up every morning checking, is there some good news? Is there something? And I think what everyone that is thinking about coming to Canada should understand is if you're trusting someone, if you are taking advice, then please take advice when we tell you that it is important that you stay with your conditions. Okay. Like Claudia mentioned, sometimes 4 years, sometimes 5 years. When you commit to that, be prepared for that. And please know that we are here to give you advice so that you can stay in Canada. We're not here to just take your money and send you back home. We want you to be our success story, not the story that we talk about and say, it was so heartbreaking. And I think that's very key. So it's very, very important that if you are taking advice, please also listen to that advice and trust that we are telling you for the betterment of the future. I think that's key, knowing that like I said, we take this home This isn't a 9 to 5. And our hearts and souls are equally in this journey as it is for those of you that are making Canada home.
And Noor, you never have to compare yourself with what happened to your friend, and because your case is completely different.
Correct.
And don't trust the YouTubers.
No, and if it sounds too good to be true, it is. It really is, especially in immigration.
And I mean,
this has been.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Go ahead, Noor.
I was just going to say, you mentioned about things like a client when they come and they say, well, I have a friend that can write a letter or any job letter. But you also have people that will come and meet you and say, we're looking for nomination. We want employer support. And then you'll come and you'll get those clients that say, well, I have someone that's willing to give me a job. I have somebody that, will give me an LMIA. Equally, those things also, where you're taking support, but it's not genuine. I think it is very, very important that recently a lot of cases that we've been seeing is audits happening on site. Okay. And so these things do really happen, and it's not to scare anyone, but it's a reality. Is the person truly working there?
Mm-hmm.
Are they working, especially after COVID, right? Where people were working from home? How do you verify if someone's at the place of employment? Recently, what we've been hearing is on-site audits. So anything and everything that you do has to be genuine now, because there's one thing of, did you meet the requirements of the permanent residency? But there's also now a new thing. Are you meeting the requirements of the job, of employment? Right? And they all go hand in hand. The government is really nailing down to hopefully, create some sort of fraud prevention. And so there's a lot of components that are involved in this meeting the conditions of PR.
And I think because we have more people interested in becoming permanent residents than the ones that we can actually accept, well, Canada as a country can pick and choose. Mm-hmm. And the country will select always the ones that are more likely to contribute to the country. And yes, Lotario was laughing because he said lying is worse than murder. And yes, in Canada, it is worse than murder, because if you are, if you, oh my God.
Yeah, it is worse than murder.
Si te cogen mintiendo.
If they caught you lying.
Thank you. Caught you lying. They will write it down. It's called misrepresentation. And that credibility is very difficult to get back. You can apply for rehabilitation for any crime that you commit. And it is a process, and it involves a passage of time, and it involves, complying with your sentence and with everything. But that credibility is something that you cannot say to anyone. Listen, you can trust me now because in 5 years I haven't lied. That is something that is not even credible.
And Claudia, and it's not only with work permits and everything. So when we have the refugee cases, one of the main reasons for refusal is credibility, because everything that you tell the officer, everything that you do in an application is there forever to stay. So it's not going to disappear. Whatever you declare in your ETA application, or whatever you declare in your first visa to Canada, the information always has to be the same, because if you change it a little bit, it's credibility. Mm-hmm. It's like people coming to Canada as a visitors, and they come and they said, what are you coming to do? Well, I come to visit my family. It's a vacation family trip. And a month after, they're submitting an application for a work permit. And guess what? A refusal for misrepresentation, because when you came to Canada, you told the officer that you were coming to visit your family for tourism, not to look for a job. So everything, absolutely everything stays there.
And that is exactly what they use to revoke a PR, a permanent residency, after. Listen, revoking a PR means that the person was already a permanent resident. So they revoked it when they quit their jobs or change provinces, when they move so soon after their PR, which is the topic of this live tonight, to another province, to another employer. And unfortunately, we signed a document. The company offered us a job for at least 1 year after the PR, and then we got it in January the 1st, and in March, by New Brunswick, by employer, I moved to Toronto, and I'm now working for the big bank in Canada. And then the officer, 3 years later, can send me a beautiful letter saying, listen, Claudia, you signed a document saying this. And all of this thing about lying is because it is misrepresentation in Canada. And it is the only thing that it is not forgettable. And it is not against you, Lotario, it's because it's the whole topic of this live today, misrep. And misrep is when I tell migration that I will do something and then I don't do it. I think it's a win-win situation, hiring a foreign worker and then supporting them for permanent residency. I don't think that the employers are so willingly doing the process because it's a long process, expensive process, and also involves high risk. What happens if in 3 months I don't like the person I brought from Japan and this person moved his entire family? So it is a moral responsibility. So employers are not as quick as say yes. They usually, from my point of view, will do it for someone who was recommended to them, not for someone who submitted a resume through Indeed or the job bank or whatever. It is possible, yes. 200,000 people in average get to this country with a work permit every year, besides the ones that come with an open work permit, only the ones that come with support from employers. So it is doable. It requires time. We have seen several clients that for some reason didn't want to come to Canada to study. They prefer the work um, stream, and they look for jobs for a year and a half, 2 years. And then with a full strategy, they focused on finding the job in the province that they needed. They spoke with the employer up front. They stated their grounds. They said, listen, this is my goal to become permanent resident. And then the whole process went well. It was well planned. They took their time. Their employers know what they are expecting and what they are doing, for how long will it take. And the employee knows that he will stay sitting in that job for 5 years or 4 years or whatever it takes, but everything goes well.
Yep. And I think a lot of people might be wondering, well, how is anyone ever going to find out? Like Leanne said, there's no police up our case. I think what you all have to remember when you get permanent residency is there's that day that you're going to apply for citizenship. And guess what? Your whole immigration history is now put to the test because you fill in everything, where you've lived, your address history, your work history, and
Your
officers
taxes. Your
officers
taxes. Who paid for your, yes, Noor, we tend to forget that in Canada everything is connected. And it's funny because I applied for PR in Manitoba and my taxes were paid in Ontario. Huh?
Yeah, they have access to Revenue Canada.
everything in Canada is canada.ca /. So if you're smart, you know that it is all one system, regardless of whether you're a permanent resident, a Canadian citizen, a business owner, an employee, immigration related. Everything is canada.ca. The whole country is connected in every way, shape, and form. And so 100% you're right. Taxes too. And so people need to remember that you might get away with it in the sense of you quit your job, you went to Ontario because that's the place you want to be. And ultimately, at the end of the day, when you apply for citizenship, bang, that's the time. An officer is going to say, well, you got permanent residency on, the 1st of June. And guess what? On the 10th of June, you're working for another company in another province. That doesn't make sense. And, I guess a lot of people always ask, well, what do I do? Why did you leave? What was the reason you left? Was it genuine? Or was it because you knew that it was easier for you to get permanent residency in another province? Therefore, you took advantage of the system and then decided to say, bye bye. And I think that's where everyone that is thinking about moving to a province, I bring it back to do your research. Can you live there for the 4 or 5 years? Are you going to be happy there? Is there a place of religion for you, culture for you, groceries, food? Is it a remote place where,
Education for your children.
Weather,
Education for your children.
yeah,
the
is there
weather.
going to be a Tim Hortons? We hear all about
Important.
Tim Hortons. Don't kill me. I know, Claudia, it's not coffee for Colombia, but people hear about stuff from even before, from stories, and the reality is very few people speak about the truth of Canada. When we come from another country and we come to Canada, we want to show our families back home that we did it and we're successful. So we don't call and say, I have to work a job 9 to 5. I have to shovel the snow. I do my own laundry. And those are the realities of Canada. And a lot of times, those reality pictures are not painted. And so, truthfully, it is your responsibility to do the research, to make sure you're happy where you're going, to make sure that you can survive the 4 years there, as well as will you be compliant when you apply for citizenship? So, not only before coming to the country, but also while arriving and then while living, to make sure that you meet those conditions that were the original conditions. Because, like everybody mentioned here, every time you put in an application, from the first day you submit till the time you do citizenship, every application is in the system. And now with AI and everything in the back end, well, very easy to scan and see, right? And keywords are huge, and another topic for another day, but things that are very important to keep in mind.
Mm-hmm.
You
We all
had
got quiet.
Yeah, this has been an amazing conversation, and I really like it because at the end we are coming into the same thinking. So we know what is right, and we know what is the best for our clients. And like you said, Ms. Noor, when we give advice, is in your best interest, not is in ours, because at the end, the one who may lose your permanent residency or your possibility to get it is you, not me. But my job is to protect you and to give you the best advice.
Well, this has been an amazing experience tonight. It was our first live in English. I enjoyed a lot. My English is rusty, definitely. Listening to you too. Now I understand why Sofia Vergara makes $100 million a year. My accent is extremely cute, as an officer said once. But what interested me the most, is that we have several viewers and accompanying us, listening to this for 1 long hour in English, which means that our audience is learning and practicing the language. So I hope you too will come back to Roundtable. We will have to rename it, Gaby, and Roundtable, so we can speak in Spanglish. And well, thank you very much to both of you, to Gaby, and to all of you who were here tonight. And I hope that we will see you in a month in the next Roundtable.
Thank you, Claudia.
Have a good night.
Bye, girls.
Thank you.